Every midnight, the violin sings, but no one is playing. Step inside Whitmore Manor, a forgotten mansion where music never died, and neither did its last performer. The Abandoned House with the Violin Song is a chilling horror tale of grief, ghosts, and a cursed symphony that demands its final note. From the first eerie whisper to the last bloodstained serenade, this story will haunt you long after the music stops. If you love atmospheric horror, cursed music, and spine-tingling ghost stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you won't miss the next chilling chapter. Chapter 1. The First Note at Midnight. The wind howled through the skeletal trees, their twisted branches clawing at the moonlit sky. Fog curled along the narrow country road like ghostly fingers dragging across the ground. At the edge of the woods, half devoured by ivy and thyme, stood the Whitmore Manor, a house long abandoned, its name whispered more often in hushed warnings than in conversation. 17-year-old Clara Whitmore had only seen the manor once from afar, during a funeral when she was a child. Now, a decade later, it loomed before her again, taller and darker than she remembered. Her parents had died in a car crash 6 months ago, and with no remaining relatives willing to take her in, the deed to the house, her ancestral home, was handed down to her. It was all she had left. As she stepped out of the taxi, the driver avoided eye contact. "You sure you want to go in there alone, miss?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Clara nodded. "I don't have much choice." He muttered something under his breath, crossed himself, and drove off. Tires crunching on the gravel road. The key trembled in her hand as she approached the door. The brass knob was cold, and as she turned it, the hinges shrieked a long metallic groan that echoed into the night. Creak! Inside, the air was stale, carrying the scent of mildew and rotting wood. Dust floated like ash in the pale moonlight pouring through cracked windows. Furniture, covered in white sheets, stood like ghosts frozen mid-motion. She shut the door behind her. The sound of the latch clicking into place felt unnaturally loud. Click. Clara hesitated in the foyer. Her footsteps echoed on the wooden floorboards as she moved cautiously forward. Thump. Thump. Somewhere deep within the house, a clock struck 12. Each chime echoed through the manor, like a countdown to something unseen. Dong, dong, dong. And then it happened. A violin began to play. The first note sliced through the silence, clear, sorrowful, and hauntingly beautiful. Clara froze. Eee? The sound didn't come from a speaker or a phone. It had depth, vibrato, life. It was coming from upstairs. She held her breath, heart hammering in her chest. Thump, 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 thump. She forced her feet to move, one trembling step after another. The staircase groaned beneath her weight. Creak. The melody continued, a slow, melancholic waltz filled with yearning and despair. Notes hung in the air like mist, wrapping around her like invisible tendrils. Room after room she passed, each one colder than the last. Faded paintings watched her from the walls, their subjects worn, but their eyes still following. At the end of the hallway stood a door, slightly ajar. The music came from within. Clara pushed the door open. A music room covered in cobwebs. Dust-coated instruments lined the walls, cellos, violas, and one grand piano, its keys yellowed with age. But in the center of the room, standing under a broken chandelier, was a violin, floating. It hovered in mid-air, its bow moving on its own, sawing across the strings with elegant precision. Scree! Clara let out a gasp and stumbled backward, knocking into an old stand. The sound it made, metal against wood, crashed through the quiet. Clang! The violin stopped. The bow dropped to the floor. The room fell deathly silent, and then came the scream. A blood-curdling, high-pitched wail that didn't sound human. Ah! Ah! Clara bolted, slamming the door shut behind her and running down the hallway, her footsteps like gunshots on the creaking floorboards. Bang, bang, bang! She didn't stop until she reached the foyer again. She clutched the railing, gasping for air. She told herself it wasn't real, that she was tired, imagining things, that grief was playing tricks on her. But when she looked up at the balcony above, she saw a figure, pale and dressed in what looked like an old concert gown, its face obscured by shadow, and it was holding the violin. Outside, the wind picked up again, howling like a chorus of the dead. The trees swayed as though mourning, and from the manor's highest window, the violin began to play again. Eee! Only now it was no longer a sorrowful melody. It was a dirge. Chapter 2. A house that breathes in silence. Clara didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, the sound of that scream echoed inside her skull. It hadn't just pierced the air, it had pierced her. The house was silent now, yet every floorboard seemed to shift with breath. Every draft whispered her name in a voice too thin to be human. By dawn, a pale gray light had spilled over the manor, washing its ancient walls in a corpse-like glow. Clara sat at the base of the grand staircase, wrapped in an old moth-eaten quilt she'd found in the parlor. The violin was real. The ghost was real. She'd seen them both. And no matter how many times she tried to tell herself otherwise, the truth clung to her like cobwebs she couldn't brush away. She stood, knees weak, and made her way to the kitchen in search of food, or at least something familiar. The refrigerator had long stopped working. She opened the pantry, where brittle shelves creaked under the weight of expired cans and dusty glass jars. Crack! A faint sound, like breath caught in wood. The house was settling again. Or was it watching her? Clara turned quickly. The hallway behind her stretched empty, but the air was heavy, thick, like something had just exhaled. Goosebumps erupted down her arms. The silence in the manor wasn't just an absence of noise. It had texture. It shifted. It breathed. She moved through the hallways, each step tentative. She needed to prove she wasn't losing her mind. Maybe there was a rational explanation. Maybe there had been someone else in the house last night. She returned to the music room, The door was shut. Her fingers hovered over the handle, trembling. She opened it. The violin was gone. The room stood still, bathed in golden morning light. The cobwebs were undisturbed, the piano untouched. But on the floor, where the bow had fallen, lay something new. A single white feather. She picked it up. It was impossibly clean, pristine. Knock! A sudden noise from upstairs. Sharp, deliberate. Knock! 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 3 distinct knocks, like someone rapping their knuckles on wood. Clara's heart raced. The sound came from the attic, the only place in the house she hadn't explored. She climbed the stairs, her breathing shallow. The door to the attic stood at the end of a narrow corridor, framed by peeling wallpaper and dead moths. She grasped the handle, cold, icy. Creak. The door opened with a groan. Dust swirled like spirits. The attic was filled with forgotten relics, trunks, broken chairs, a child's rocking horse, and an old phonograph. In the corner, an ornate mirror leaned against the wall. She approached it. Her reflection stared back, pale and drawn. Then it blinked. She hadn't. Clack! Something fell behind her. She spun around. The phonograph had turned on by itself. The needle dropped. Scritch! Music spilled from its horn, scratchy, warped, but undeniably a violin solo. A different one. Faster, urgent, angry. Eek! Dee! And layered beneath it, a voice. Soft at first, like wind against glass. You shouldn't have come back. Clara screamed. Ah! She bolted from the attic, feet slamming the floor. Bang, bang, bang. The voice followed, whispering through the walls. You woke us. Back in the foyer, Clara collapsed against the front door. The house had secrets. It had breath, and it was no longer sleeping. It had noticed her, and now it wanted her to stay. Chapter 3. The Violinist in the Mirror. Clara didn't leave the manor the next day, though every rational thought screamed at her to run. Something deeper, something instinctual kept her anchored to the house. It was as if the air itself had woven invisible chains around her ankles. Curiosity, fear, grief, they had all tangled into a web she couldn't escape. She sat in the parlor, flipping through old photo albums she had found in a drawer beneath the piano. Most pages were yellowed and curling, the photographs black and white, filled with stiff postures and joyless expressions. But one picture caught her eye. It showed a young woman, no older than 20, standing beside a grand piano. She wore a flowing gown and held a violin in one hand. Her expression was blank, almost hollow, but her eyes, they shimmered, even through the faded print. Written beneath in elegant looping script, Evelyn Whitmore, 1924. Clara's fingers trembled. Evelyn, the same name engraved on a brass plaque she had seen nailed to the music room wall the night before. A distant crash interrupted her thoughts. Crash! It echoed from upstairs. Clara jumped to her feet. The sound had come from one of the bedrooms. She ascended the stairs cautiously, every step creaking beneath her weight. Creak, creak. She paused in front of a door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly ajar, the same one that had housed the floating violin 2 nights ago. But now it stood still, quiet. She pushed it open. Nothing had changed. The chandelier still hung broken, the instruments untouched, except the mirror. It was no longer leaning against the attic wall. Somehow, impossibly, it was now propped upright in the center of the music room. Clara's breath caught. She stepped toward it. Her reflection stared back at her, but something was off. ... The lighting didn't match. Her reflection's surroundings were darker, tinged in a cold blue hue, like moonlight underwater. She leaned closer. Her reflection smiled. Clara hadn't. Her heart stopped. She stumbled back. Thud, thump. The mirror shimmered. And then, slowly, deliberately, another figure entered the reflection's frame. A woman in a vintage concert gown. Pale skin, hollow eyes, and in her hands, a violin. Evelyn. The bow lifted. Eee. A note soft. Mournful emerged not from the air, but from the mirror itself. It resonated in Clara's bones, vibrating her teeth, echoing behind her eyes. She turned around. The room was empty, but in the mirror, Evelyn played on, her bow gliding gracefully across the strings. The music swelled. Shh. Suddenly, Evelyn's gaze snapped up, directly at Clara. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Just a hiss, long and dry. Sss. And then she lunged, not physically, but in the mirror, rushing forward, her face contorting with rage, mouth wide in a scream so silent it thundered in Clara's mind. Clara screamed too. Ah! She hurled a stool at the mirror. Smash! Glass exploded outward, shards flying like daggers. Clara shielded herself with her arms as fragments rained down. When it was over, the mirror lay shattered on the floor, and silence returned, dense and suffocating. Clara collapsed to her knees, panting, and then she heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from above. Thump, thump, thump. Not from the attic, from inside the walls. She ran out of the room, back into the hallway. But the air had changed. The light was dimmer. The walls seemed to pulse with breath. She passed the portrait of Evelyn on the landing, except Evelyn's eyes were no longer looking forward. They were turned, watching her. Clara stumbled backward, nearly falling down the stairs. She grabbed the banister and ran down, down, down. In the foyer, she collapsed against the wall. The silence returned, but she knew it now, knew its rhythm. The house was watching. Evelyn was not a memory. She was still here. And somehow, the mirror had been a gateway, a window, or a warning. That night, Clara didn't sleep, and from somewhere deep in the manor, the violin played again. Hey, da. This time, the melody was colder. It wasn't just sad anymore. It was angry. Chapter 4. The locked room that opens at night. The day passed like a shadow across the walls, slow and cold. Clara remained wrapped in a blanket in the library, watching as the light changed hue and began to fade. The shattered mirror in the music room, the ghostly figure of Evelyn, the violent scream echoing in her mind. None of it had faded. If anything, it all felt closer now, as though the house had drawn her deeper into its lungs, preparing to exhale. She tried to distract herself with reading, pulling old books from the shelves, dusty tomes with cracked leather spines and fading gold script. Most were too dry to follow. But one book, hidden behind a row of others, caught her attention. It was a diary. The inside cover read, Evelyn Whitmore. Clara's breath caught. She opened the journal carefully. Pages were filled with swirling cursive, neatly penned but growing shakier with time. The final entries were different, erratic, smeared with ink. They don't understand the music. It's not just a melody. It's a voice. It speaks to me when the house sleeps. He's behind the locked door. The one no one dares open. But I hear him scraping, clawing. He plays when the clock chimes midnight. Clara stared at the words. A locked door. She knew exactly which one Evelyn meant. The room at the end of the eastern corridor. It had been bolted shut since the moment Clara arrived. She had tried the handle on her first day. It didn't budge. But something told her it would open tonight. As darkness crept back into the manor, so did the cold. Clara lit the fire in the sitting room, though the flames did little to chase away the chill sinking into the walls. The grandfather clock ticked steadily. Tick, tock, tick, tock. She watched the hands crawl toward midnight. And when the 12th chime rang out, dong, 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 Clara stood and began walking. The eastern corridor was darker than the rest of the house. The lights here always flickered, even during the day. She approached the door slowly. It was old, the paint cracked and peeling. The handle looked like it hadn't been turned in decades. She reached for it. Her hand froze. Clunk, the sound of a lock unlatching. Slowly, from inside, the door creaked open on its own. No breeze, no wind. Creak! Darkness spilled out like ink. Clara stepped inside. The air was ice cold. She could see her breath. Shh! It was a bedroom, once regal, now rotting. Drapes hung in tatters from the canopy bed. A vanity sat in the corner, its mirror blackened by mold. And on the far side of the room stood a music stand. On it, a faded sheet of music, and beside it, leaning against a chair, was the violin. But this one was different, older. The wood was darker, the strings rusted. Clara approached slowly. As she did, the door slammed shut behind her. Slam! She screamed. Ah! Ran to the door. It wouldn't open. She was trapped. She turned to the music stand. The sheet was covered in strange symbols, scratched notes, illegible clefs, and something else. Letters, hidden between the lines. Reveal him. Clara backed away. Then the violin lifted from its resting place, floating again. Ee! It played on its own, the sound raspy, broken, as though the strings were screaming. Scree! The walls shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. A voice whispered in her ear, "Open your eyes." She spun. No one was there. The vanity mirror now glowed faintly. She approached it. Her reflection stared back, trembling. And then behind her, a man. His face was skeletal, eyes hollow, his skin stretched thin like parchment. He wore a conductor's suit, black as coal, and held a baton in his hand. Clara turned. Nothing. She looked again at the mirror. He was still there, closer now. Da-hum! The violin played faster, she screamed. Ah! The man in the mirror raised the baton, and in the room, the violin exploded, shattering into splinters mid-air. The door flew open. Clara fled, ran through the corridor, down the stairs, heart thundering. Thump, thump, thump. Behind her, laughter, low, cruel. She didn't stop until she reached the front doors. She tried to open them. They wouldn't budge. She was locked in. And above, in the hallway she had just left, the music began again. The same melody, but now joined by another violin. A duet, played by something no longer human. Clara sank to the floor. The house was alive, and tonight it had opened a door. Chapter 5. Footsteps Between the Notes. Clara lay curled on the cold floor of the foyer, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the staircase above. The music had faded, but its echo lingered in the walls. Her pulse beat in rhythm with the phantom notes, low, steady, and ominous. Dum, 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 dum. Outside, the world remained still. Inside the manor, the silence held its breath. She eventually rose, legs stiff and trembling. The fire in the hearth had long since died, casting the room in flickering shadows from the weak moonlight. Somewhere, water dripped rhythmically. Drip, drip, drip. The walls groaned as if protesting her movement. Every board she stepped on responded. Creak, snap, thump. She returned to the library, where Evelyn's diary still lay open. Clara stared at the last entry again. He plays between the notes, but I hear him when no one else can. When the music stops, listen, truly listen. That's when he walks. A chill slithered up Clara's spine. The music was a mask, a distraction. The true horror came after the melody ended. She set the diary aside and stood. The plan formed itself in her mind. She needed to hear it again, not just the music, but what came after. Maybe then she could understand what this entity wanted, why Evelyn was trapped, why the house wouldn't let her leave. But the idea of deliberately inviting the music to play again made her skin crawl. She waited until the house was heavy with night, midnight, the hour when breath stopped and shadows deepened. The violin began on cue. Clara sat in the middle of the music room, hands clutched tightly in her lap. The notes shimmered in the air, reverberating through her bones. She counted each measure, each crescendo, and then it stopped, abruptly, as if the bow had been yanked away mid-note. Silence. She held her breath. Then came the footsteps. Step, step, step. Not heavy, not rushed. Just slow, precise. They came from the hallway beyond the music room. She rose to her feet. Step, step, closer, step. They stopped. She turned toward the hallway, empty. The air shifted, grew heavier. Then came the voice, barely a whisper. "You're playing his part now." Clara spun, but no one was there. The music stand stood untouched. The violin was gone again. The floor beneath her groaned, creaking ache. She ran to the hallway. Darkness greeted her like an old friend. And then a flicker, a silhouette at the end of the corridor. Male, tall, thin. Clara opened her mouth to speak. It vanished. She stepped forward, heart hammering. Nothing. The lights above flickered. Zzz, pop. They went out. Now blind, Clara stumbled forward, hands trailing the wall. Then came the whisper again, closer. "He needs someone to finish the symphony." Her fingers brushed something smooth. A doorknob. She turned it. The door opened into a small study. A single candle was lit inside, its flame dancing wildly. On the desk lay another sheet of music, but this one was unfinished. Blank measures lined the bottom, waiting. Waiting for someone to complete the melody. Clara stepped forward, and behind her, step, step, step. She turned just in time to see the shadow emerge. The conductor. Only this time, his face was clear. Half rotted, half bone. One eye socket empty, the other glowing faintly red. He raised his baton. Clara screamed. "Ah!" The candle went out. Total darkness. Clara ran. Through the house. Through time. Footsteps chased her. Stomp! 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 Every corridor twisted. Every door changed. The house was alive and rearranging itself. She finally found a room she recognized. Her bedroom. She slammed the door, locked it, pressed her back against it. Silence. No more music. But under the crack of the door, she saw shadows moving, dancing like a ballet of ghosts. And faintly, ever so faintly, tap, tap, tap. Like a metronome ticking in the dark. The footsteps hadn't stopped. They were simply waiting. Waiting between the notes. Chapter 6. The Score Written in Blood. The morning after the footsteps had stalked the silence, Clara did not wake so much as emerge from a fever dream of flickering shadows, distorted music, and the sightless eye of the conductor burning into her mind. Sunlight, thin and gray, crept through the torn curtains of her bedroom. But even daylight in Whitmore Manor felt false, as though the house allowed the sun to enter out of obligation, not welcome. She hadn't slept, not truly. The tapping had stopped shortly before dawn. No more footsteps, no more voices, just the hum of silence, too quiet, too still. Clara knew she was running out of time. The house was changing, shifting. It wanted something from her, and she feared that if she didn't figure it out soon, it would take what it needed. Her dreams had repeated one thing over and over, the score. She needed to find it. Back in the library, Clara began digging through the shelves. Many books were destroyed by mold or damp. Some crumbled at the touch. But she found a hidden latch behind one of the shelves, a small wooden panel with a carved treble clef. She pressed it. Click! The shelf trembled. A section of the bookcase groaned open, revealing a narrow tunnel behind it. She took a candle, lit it, and stepped inside. The air was stale and sharp with dust. Cobwebs brushed her skin like cold fingers. At the end of the tunnel, a small stone room opened. There, on a pedestal in the center, lay a thick, leather-bound portfolio. Her candle flickered as she stepped closer. The smell hit her first, metallic, sweet, and sour. Blood. She opened the folio slowly. Inside were pages of sheet music, but the ink was deep red. The notes, meticulously written, looked like they had bled into the parchment. She touched a corner. It was sticky, fresh. Drip, drip, drip. A droplet fell onto her shoulder. She looked up. The ceiling wept blood. Drip, drip, drip. Clara stumbled backward. Heart pounding, she turned to leave, but the tunnel had disappeared. Only stone wall. Bang! She screamed. Ah! The candle blew out. Darkness. She fumbled through the pitch-black room, hands sliding across wet walls. She clutched the portfolio to her chest. Then a sound. A whisper. Play it. Then louder. Play it! Finish what she started! The voices surged like a chorus, overlapping, growing. Finish it! Finish it! Finish it! The ground shook. Clara dropped to her knees, clutching her ears, and then silence. A sliver of light appeared ahead. The stone wall parted. She crawled through, emerging into the music room once again, as if no time had passed. The portfolio still clutched in her hands. She dropped it on the grand piano, opened it. The pages inside pulsed, and then the music began to play, by itself. No violin, no hands, just the score. And behind the music screaming, voices woven into the melody, a woman's wail, a man's tortured howl, children weeping. Every note carried pain. Ee! Ah! Scree! Clara turned to run, but her feet were frozen, not by fear, by the music. It held her in place. The piano lid slammed shut by itself. Slam! And then, slowly, something began to rise from the shadows behind her. The conductor. Only now he was full, whole, skin stitched from shadows, flesh composed of black fog. His baton dripped with blood. He walked past her, took the portfolio, and smiled. Then he began to conduct. From nowhere, instruments played, phantom strings, an invisible choir. The air vibrated. Whoom! Clara fell to her knees. The room spun. The music was not just heard. It was inside her, in her veins, in her bones. She screamed, "Ah!" And then blackness. When Clara awoke, she was lying in her bed, morning light again. The portfolio was gone, but burned into her arm, in fine red lines, was the opening bar of the score. Written in blood. Chapter 7. Whispers from the Attic. The burn on Clara's arm throbbed beneath her sleeve, a red scar shaped like the opening bars of the blood-written score. It itched, it pulsed, and sometimes, in the quiet, she swore she could hear it singing. A low, almost imperceptible hum, like strings vibrating in her veins. She had tried to leave the house twice. Each time, the front door opened to a wall of fog. Not outside, not daylight, just gray, infinite fog. As if the world beyond the manor had vanished. Trapped. Again, her thoughts returned to Evelyn. The attic. There had always been something about that space. Something that seemed to call Clara every time the music played. Whispers at the edge of thought. Murmurs in her sleep. Today she would go. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath her weight. Creak! Creak! Thump! The trap door to the attic hung slightly ajar, as if someone had gone up recently. Clara hesitated, then pushed it open. Urch! The wooden ladder was cold under her hands. Dust flaked off in clouds as she climbed. The air grew colder with each step. She reached the top and pulled herself into the attic. The room was cavernous. Slanted ceilings, beams wrapped in cobwebs. Old trunks and furniture covered with sheets, and beyond that light, a faint glow from the far corner. Clara approached. The glow came from an oil lamp sitting beside a dusty writing desk. Next to it, open and undisturbed for decades, lay Evelyn's second diary. The first page was stained with tears or something darker. She read aloud in a whisper. They told me to stop playing, but I couldn't. The music, it speaks. He came to me in dreams. The conductor. He taught me the rest of the song. Clara turned the page. The attic is safe, but only if I listen to the whispers. Suddenly, scratch, scratch, from behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Stop. Then a whisper. Clara. She froze. The voice was soft, female, familiar. She turned back to the diary. Another line had appeared, written in fresh ink. Look beneath the floorboards. Clara's breath caught. She knelt and ran her fingers along the warped wood. One board was looser than the rest. She pried it up with effort. Beneath was a small space and a box. She lifted it. Inside, an old reel of film, a ribbon of crimson silk, and a letter. She opened the letter. If you found this... The song has begun again. He needs a vessel. I was the first. Don't become the second. Burn the score. Clara backed away from the box, heart pounding. Knock. Knock, knock, from the attic wall. Knock, knock, knock. It was rhythmic, deliberate, a beat, a conductor's cue. Then came the music, soft at first. Ee, a single violin playing from the nowhere. And the whispers grew louder. Play with us. Play or be played. Finish the symphony. Clara stumbled back, slamming into a trunk. It burst open. Bones, dozens of them, tiny, children. She screamed. Ah! Footsteps raced across the attic floorboards. Thump, thump, thump. But no one was there. Then Evelyn, standing in the corner, her translucent form glowing faintly. She looked older than in the photographs, hollowed. Tired. Burn it, Evelyn whispered. But where? Clara asked, her voice cracking. The hearth, Evelyn said. He fears fire. He always has. The ghost turned to mist, vanishing in a gust of cold wind. Whoosh! Clara ran, down the ladder, down the stairs, to the sitting room. She tossed the score, the copy she had found, the one pulsing with blood, into the fire. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, screech! A howl like 1,000 violins being dragged across rusted strings. The fire turned blue. The walls shook. The conductor's screams split the air. No! Clara covered her ears, fell to her knees, and then silence. The fire returned to orange. The walls stopped trembling. The whispers faded. She sat, panting, trembling. It was over, wasn't it? Then she looked at her arm, the scar still glowing, and from upstairs the soft sound of footsteps. Step, step, step. Chapter 8. The Ghost Who Played for Love. The fire had died hours ago, yet the warmth clung to Clara's skin like a memory she couldn't let go. Her arm still glowed faintly, the scar red as fresh ink. The whisper of footsteps had faded, but she knew better than to believe it was over. Evelyn's voice lingered in her head. Burn the score. She had obeyed, and yet the presence remained. Sleep eluded her, so she returned to the attic with a candle in hand. She couldn't stop thinking about the film reel in the box. Clara had spotted a rusted projector in one of the old bedrooms. Maybe, just maybe, it still worked. Dust clung to the reel like skin. She placed it carefully into the projector, clicked it on, and waited as it whirred to life. The wall flickered with pale light. A scene appeared. A ballroom. Dozens of people danced, twirling to a melody that played without sound. At the edge of the screen stood Evelyn, young, radiant, her eyes full of wonder. She held a violin. A man stepped into view, tall, dark hair, eyes full of hunger and fire. He reached for her hand. The film jumped, screeched. Another scene. Evelyn played for him in the music room, bow gliding over strings like silk. He stood behind her, whispering into her ear. Clara could almost hear it, a faint hum. The projector faltered. The film melted, swirled from the machine. Clara backed away. Then came the scream. Ah! A woman's voice, high, piercing. It echoed through the house, rolling down staircases, through the walls. Clara covered her ears. It didn't stop. She fled into the hall. The scream became a sob, then a whisper. He said he loved me. She turned. Evelyn stood at the top of the stairs. Not the vengeful ghost from before, but a woman broken. Her dress tattered, her hands shaking. I thought the music was for me, she whispered. Clara stepped closer. Who was he? She asked. A composer, Evelyn said. A genius. A liar. She closed her eyes. I loved him. He promised me a song that would never end. Said our souls would dance forever in its rhythm. The house moaned around them. He needed more than love to finish it, Evelyn continued. He needed blood, devotion, sacrifice. Clara felt cold creep down her spine. You gave him yours, Evelyn nodded, and others gave theirs. Her voice broke. The children, the musicians, all buried beneath the boards, all part of the symphony. Clara stared at her. And the score? It was my final gift. My final curse. The wind screamed through the manor. Shh! Evelyn looked behind her, eyes wide. He's coming. The conductor. His footsteps echoed now. Stomp, stomp, stomp. He thinks you can finish it, Evelyn whispered. But you can end it. She handed Clara a key. Go to the basement. The door was hidden beneath the stairs. The key turned with a reluctant click. Click. Thunk. The air inside the basement was thick and wet. She descended into darkness. The walls dripped. The floor squished beneath her feet. Then she saw them. Dozens of violins, hung from the ceiling like corpses. Each had a name carved into it. Children, women, men, and one read, Evelyn Whitmore. A single music stand stood in the center. Upon it, the final score. Clara picked it up. The notes burned. The conductor appeared from the shadows. He raised his baton. Clara tore the score in half. "Reap!" he shrieked. "No!" He lunged. Clara threw the pages into the lantern. Whoosh! Flames roared. The violins caught fire one by one. Crack! Snap! Shriek! The conductor screamed. His body dissolved into smoke. And in his place, Evelyn, smiling, free. "You did it," she whispered. The house groaned a final time. And then, silence. No whispers, no footsteps, just silence. Clara climbed the stairs. Outside, morning light had returned. Real light. And when she stepped out, the wind carried one last note. A soft violin chord. Eee. A goodbye. Chapter 9. Silence before the final movement. For the first time in weeks, the house was still. No footsteps, no whispers, no weeping violins or blood-written notes. The fire had been extinguished, the violins destroyed, and the conductor gone. Evelyn had smiled. She had vanished with the smoke, free at last from the curse that had shackled her soul. Outside, the world had returned. Birds chirped in the distance. Wind rustled through the trees like a sigh of relief. Sunlight filtered through the mansion's broken windows, chasing away the last shadows of the night. Clara had survived, but she did not feel safe. She stood in the front garden, staring at the crumbling facade of Whitmore Manor. The scar on her arm had faded to a dull pink, no longer glowing or burning. But it was there, a reminder. Inside, silence held the halls like an ancient breath, the kind that comes just before a scream. Clara spent the day packing. She had made her decision. The house had to be abandoned, perhaps demolished. There was nothing left to save. She moved through the rooms slowly. Pausing in the music room, the attic, the library. Each space held echoes, but no sound, only memory. She found herself in Evelyn's old bedroom, the sheets still untouched since that first night. She sat on the bed, closed her eyes, and then, thump! Her eyes snapped open. No, it couldn't be. Thump! Thump! Footsteps, but only two. Then silence. She rose, heart already pounding. Just the house settling, she whispered to herself. But the air was colder now, thinner. She walked down the hallway, floorboards creaking. Creak, creak. She reached the foyer, still empty. Then she heard it. Not footsteps. A sound far more familiar, far more dangerous. A single note. E. Violin. Her blood turned to ice. No, she whispered. She ran to the music room. The piano stood silent. No instruments, no conductor, nothing out of place. But the music continued soft, barely audible, like wind through strings. She followed the sound to the back of the house, to a door she had never noticed before. It wasn't locked. Inside was a small storage room filled with broken furniture and dust-covered trunks. But on the far wall was a painting she hadn't seen before. It showed Evelyn and the conductor. They stood side by side, hands entwined, and between them another figure, a child. Clara stared. The child had her eyes. She stepped back, breath caught in her throat. Behind her, something moved. A violin bow slid across strings. Scree! She turned. No one. But the music grew louder, faster, violent. Dun, 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 dunt. It was a rehearsal. No, a warning. The final movement hadn't been played. It had only been delayed. She stumbled out of the room. The house darkened around her. Shadows lengthened. The light dimmed. Tick, tick, tick. The grandfather clock moved. Midnight approached. She ran to the front door, tried to open it. It wouldn't budge. She pounded on it. Bang, bang, bang! Then a voice, soft, behind her. The audience awaits. She turned. At the top of the stairs, the conductor stood once more. No longer smoke, no longer shadow, solid, smiling. He raised his baton, and in the silence that followed, the house inhaled. Chapter 10. The Last Serenade of the Dead. The baton hovered in the air. Clara stood frozen at the bottom of the staircase, her gaze locked on the figure above. The conductor, once an echo, now flesh, once a whisper, now a voice loud enough to silence the world. The house exhaled. Whoosh! Dust spiraled into the air like ash from a pyre. Candles lit on their own, flames igniting with sharp pops and flickers of blue. Pop, pop. A low hum began beneath the floorboards. Then the music. It came not from instruments, but from the walls themselves. Da, boom, boom. Each note pulled at Clara's spine like strings being tightened. Her scar throbbed again, pulsing with the rhythm of the infernal melody. The conductor stepped forward. With each motion of his baton, the house changed. Shadows emerged from the corners. Figures cloaked in smoke and sorrow. The dead. Dozens of them. Musicians, dancers, children, all spectral, all summoned. They took their places around the room, gripping phantom instruments that materialized from air thick with gloom. And Clara? She stood in the center, surrounded. He pointed to her. You are the final note. She shook her head. No, I burned it. I ended the score. The conductor grinned, eyes burning like dying stars. You burned a copy, but the music lives in blood, in you. He raised his baton again. The ghostly orchestra began. Screech! Done! Thwack! The sound was wrong, jagged like bones breaking in rhythm. The violins shrieked, the drums pounded like a dying heart. Clara screamed, "Ah!" But her scream was part of the music, a crescendo of despair. She dropped to her knees, clutching her ears. Her blood boiled with each beat. The scar on her arm split open. Red lines crawled up her skin, musical notation etched in agony, note by note, pain by pain. Evelyn appeared beside her, no longer solid, but golden light in a woman's shape. "Fight it," she whispered. "I can't," Clara sobbed. "It's inside me." "Then finish it," Evelyn said, "but on your terms." The room cracked. Plaster fell. The sound rose. Crack! Rumble! Clara stood. The music rose with her. She reached out her hand. A violin materialized, blood-red wood, strung with silver thread. Her fingers knew it. Muscle memory born of generations. The orchestra faltered. The conductor's grin wavered. Clara raised her bow, and she played. A single note. E! And a single note. Clear, pure, true. It silenced the others. The ghosts turned toward her, and she played again. This time, not the melody he wrote, but hers, a requiem, a mourning song for the dead. Her body burned with fire. Each pull of the bow cut like razors. Her blood hit the strings. Scree! Drip! Scree! And the house screamed, "Ah!" The conductor lunged, but Clara kept playing. He hit an invisible wall, a dome of sound and light. He roared, dissolved. The ghosts began to vanish, one by one, each fading with a smile. Evelyn was last. She placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "You freed us." And then she too was gone. The final note hung in the air. Then silence. Clara fell to her knees. The house groaned. Thrum! And then collapsed. The roof caved. Walls crumbled. 1,000 screams escaped as dust consumed the manor. When Clara awoke, she was lying in the grass. Where Whitmore Manor had stood was now just a scorched circle, blackened and silent. But she was alive. The scar was gone. No more music, just wind, birds, and peace. The final serenade had been played, and the dead at last could rest.